Parents refused to pay for my college and said that I was on my own, then bragged about my graduation and sent vile emails attacking my aunt and uncle who supported me after. Hi Reddit, my 20F graduation from a pretty well-respected school, at least in this state, is in 2 weeks. We're only allowed 4 tickets per student. It's not the school being stingy, the graduation ceremony is held in the university's main auditorium, and it just doesn't hold that many people, and my graduating class is huge. I bought 3 tickets. I invited my Aunt Donna, Uncle Kevin, and my cousin, Jeremy. I did not invite my parents, Esther and Frank. And that's the problem. It all started back in high school, during my junior year. My parents called me into the living room for a family meeting. It wasn't about anything I'd done wrong, which was a relief. It was about money. They sat me down on the sofa, and my dad, Frank, cleared his throat and launched into this prepared speech. He said they were getting older, and they needed to focus on their retirement. They said they had their own lives to live, their own future to plan, and that future didn't include paying for my college education. My mom, Esther, added that I was turning 18 soon, becoming a legal adult, and I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I remember just sitting there, nodding slowly. I wasn't shocked, not really. I think a part of me had always expected it. My parents were frugal when it came to me only, to put it mildly. They weren't poor, not at all. They lived comfortably. But they were always careful with money, especially when it came to me. Asking for anything, even necessities, felt like a negotiation. New clothes? Only if I'd visibly outgrown the old ones, and even then, there'd be a lecture about how expensive everything was and how I should be more grateful for what I had. A school trip? I had to practically beg them to let me go. It wasn't that they couldn't afford it, it was that they didn't want to. So, the college announcement? It wasn't a surprise. It was just confirmation. Thankfully, I'd had a backup plan. I'd spoken to my Uncle Kevin, my dad's older brother, a few months earlier. I'd always been closer to him and his family than to my own parents. My parents, especially when I was younger, were always busy. They had a very active social life. They'd drop me off at Uncle Kevin and Aunt Donna's house, sometimes for the whole weekend. I practically grew up there. Aunt Donna never complained, never made me feel like a burden. She and Uncle Kevin treated me like their own daughter. My cousin, Jeremy, who's 4 years older than me, was like the big brother I never had. So, I went to Uncle Kevin, not really expecting him to pay for everything. I was planning to ask him to co-sign a student loan. But before I could even get the words out, he said, "Don't worry about college. Donna and I will take care of it. You just focus on your studies." Aunt Donna immediately agreed, saying I was family, that they were happy to help. I offered, multiple times, to pay them back after I graduated and got a job, but they refused. They're both doctors, he's a surgeon, she's a pediatrician, so they're financially secure. Jeremy had already graduated from college, so they weren't facing any other tuition bills. Fast forward to the present. Graduation is rapidly approaching. I got the tickets, sent them to my aunt and uncle, and didn't even think about my parents. I honestly believed they wouldn't care. Since I started college, our relationship had become even more distant. I'd go home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but even then, we barely interacted. They'd be busy with their friends, hosting parties or going out. I'd usually end up driving over to my uncle's place, which was about an hour away. Jeremy and I would try to coordinate our visits home so we could all spend time together. It felt normal. It felt like family. Then, last week, the phone call happened. It was afternoon. My mom called, making small talk at first. "How are your classes going? Are you excited about graduation?" It felt forced, unnatural. Then my dad got on the line. He cleared his throat, just like he did back in high school, and asked, "So, have you decided who you're inviting to the graduation ceremony?" I felt a knot form in my stomach. I just blurted out, "I already invited Uncle Kevin, Aunt Donna, and Jeremy." Silence. Then, my mom's voice, sharp and strained, "You didn't invite your own parents?" I tried to explain about the limited tickets, about how the auditorium was small, but my dad interrupted me. He started talking, his voice rising with each word. "I've been telling everyone about your graduation. All my friends. I've been bragging about how you're graduating from a pretty good college, how proud I am. I'll look like a complete fool if I'm not even there. Your mother and I will be humiliated." That's when I snapped. All the years of feeling like an afterthought, of feeling like a burden, of feeling like I was less important than their social life, it all came pouring out. "You haven't even asked me about college in 4 years, I yelled. "You're always too busy with your friends, spending money on fancy dinners and vacations. You told me I was on my own." My mom started yelling back, "We raised you. We put a roof over your head, clothes on your back. We invested so much time and money in you. And this is how you repay us? With ingratitude? Invested?" I retorted. "You did the bare minimum. And you were the ones who decided not to pay for college. You told me, very clearly, that I was an adult and had to take care of myself." I reminded them, word for word, of that conversation in the living room. I told them that Uncle Kevin and Aunt Donna were the ones who had been there for me, that they were my real family. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I immediately blocked their numbers on my phone. I needed to talk to someone. I called Uncle Kevin. I poured out the whole story. He listened patiently, without interrupting. When I was finished, he said, in his calm, reassuring voice, "You did what you had to do. Don't doubt yourself for a second, kid. You're part of our family, and we're proud of you. Then, 2 days later, I received an email from my dad. It was a long email, full of justifications and backhanded apologies. He claimed they hadn't spent much money on me when I was growing up because they wanted me to be humble and appreciative. He said they'd always believed we had a close and loving relationship, and that they'd only wanted me to be independent. He said they were devastated that I'd misinterpreted their actions and that I'd chosen my uncle's family over them. He begged me to unblock them and send them tickets to the graduation. He swore they wouldn't post anything on social media, that they just wanted a chance to repair our relationship. He even had the audacity to complain that I'd invited Jeremy, my cousin, but not them. I knew, deep down, that it was probably all a manipulation tactic, that they were just trying to save face. But it still stung. Ida for not inviting my parents to my graduation ceremony? Edit. A few people have asked for more context. One question was about why my parents were so focused on bragging about my graduation. My college is pretty prestigious. It's consistently ranked among the top business schools in the state, and it has a very active and influential alumni network. I guess graduating from there is a status symbol in their social circle. Another question was about why I maintained contact with my parents for so long, even though they were emotionally distant. It's complicated. I didn't have anywhere else to live during the school year. My uncle would have welcomed me with open arms, I know that. But I felt uncomfortable asking. I didn't want to be a burden. As for staying in touch, it was partly out of obligation, partly out of habit. I was so used to being on the periphery of their lives, it felt normal. And, I admit, there was a small part of me that still hoped things would change, that they would somehow become the parents I always wanted. Update 1. Okay, I've made a decision. I'm not going to respond to my parents' email, and I'm definitely keeping them blocked. I reread the email several times, trying to analyze it objectively. And the more I read it, the more I realize they hadn't actually apologized for anything. They just offered a series of excuses and justifications for their behavior. They'd tried to make me feel guilty, to make me question my own perceptions. And then, the surprise. My Aunt Donna and Uncle Kevin were originally planning to fly in on the day of the graduation ceremony. But they called me yesterday and said they'd changed their flights. They were arriving 2 days early. They said they wanted to spend some quality time with me before the graduation craziness began. I was overjoyed. Having them here, in person, made all the difference. We went out for dinner last night, just the three of us. I finally felt comfortable enough to talk to my uncle, face to face, about the whole situation with my parents. I told him about their email, about how they were claiming they just wanted to impress their friends. Uncle Kevin just sighed and shook his head. He said, "That sounds exactly like your father. He's always been that way." He then proceeded to tell me stories about my dad when they were kids. Apparently, my dad, even as a teenager, was obsessed with social status. He always tried to befriend the wealthiest, most popular kids, even though their family was, in Uncle Kevin's words, solidly middle class, nothing extravagant. He said my dad and mom met in college, at a fraternity party, and bonded over their shared ambition to climb the social ladder. Uncle Kevin then got serious. He told me that a lot of my dad's current friends, the people he's so desperate to impress, are not exactly role models. He said he'd heard rumors of extramarital affairs, questionable business practices, all sorts of things. But they all maintained this facade of respectability, of being perfect, happy families. He said it was absolutely pathetic that my dad, at his age, still cared so much about what these people thought, especially when it meant jeopardizing his relationship with his own daughter. Hearing all of that from my uncle, someone I trust implicitly, was incredibly validating. It confirmed what I'd always suspected: my parents' priorities were completely skewed. They cared more about appearances than about genuine connection. Any lingering guilt I'd been feeling just disappeared. The graduation is in 3 days. I'm trying not to obsess over what my parents might do. I'm hoping they'll just stay away, that they'll realize they've lost. But a part of me is bracing for some kind of public scene, some attempt to embarrass me or manipulate the situation. Update 2, graduation day. It finally arrived. And the ceremony itself? It was magical. Everything I'd hoped for. I walked across that stage, shook the Jack's hand, received my diploma, and felt this overwhelming sense of accomplishment. My Aunt Donna, Uncle Kevin, and Jeremy, who arrived that morning, just in time for the ceremony, after pulling an all-nighter to finish a work project, were in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else. I could see them beaming with pride. It meant the world to me. After the ceremony, we took the obligatory photos, me in my cap and gown, with my aunt and uncle, with Jeremy, with some of my classmates. We were all laughing, feeling giddy with relief and excitement. Then, we left the auditorium. We were heading to a nearby restaurant, a really nice Italian place that Uncle Kevin had booked weeks in advance, for a celebratory lunch. That's when it happened. My phone started buzzing like crazy. Notifications from Facebook, Instagram, even text messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. My Uncle Kevin's phone started buzzing, too. Then Aunt Donna's. Then Jeremy's. My parents had gone on a social media rampage. They'd posted this long, rambling, incredibly vicious rant on multiple platforms, accusing me of being a spoiled, ungrateful daughter, and accusing my aunt and uncle of brainwashing me and stealing me away from them. I couldn't see the posts directly because I'd blocked them, but my relatives started sending us screenshots. It was horrifying. They claimed I'd been demanding they pay for my college tuition because I was jealous that my Aunt Donna and Uncle Kevin had paid for Jeremy's education. They repeated their tired old line about wanting to raise me to be humble and independent, and they claimed I'd run crying to my uncle, who had then taken advantage of the situation to poison me against my parents. But the absolute worst part, the part that made my stomach churn and my blood boil, was what they said about my aunt and uncle's miscarriage. They said that my aunt and uncle were bitter and jealous because they'd lost a baby a few years after Jeremy was born. They claimed my aunt and uncle were projecting their grief and longing onto me, treating me like the daughter they'd never had. They even went so far as to suggest that the miscarriage was some kind of divine retribution, implying that my aunt and uncle weren't worthy of having another child. It was a lie. A cruel, twisted, disgusting lie. It's true that my Aunt Donna had a miscarriage. It happened a few months before I was born. They didn't know the baby's gender, but my aunt always said she had a feeling it would have been a girl. When I was born, they were overjoyed. They've always been incredibly kind, loving, and supportive. To see my parents weaponize the tragedy, to use it to attack my aunt and uncle, to try to make me feel guilty, it was beyond comprehension. I stood there, on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, shaking with rage and disbelief. I wanted to unblock my parents, to expose them for the horrible people they were. But my Uncle Kevin stopped me. He put his hand on my arm. "Don't," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "Don't give them the satisfaction. They want a reaction. They want to drag you into the mud with them. Don't let them." He said he would handle it. He said he'd contact his lawyer, that he'd explore legal options. He said that everyone in the family knew what my dad was like, that nobody would take the post seriously. They were sending us screenshots out of shock and disgust, not because they believed a word of it. We went inside the restaurant. I tried to put it out of my mind, to focus on celebrating my accomplishment. It was difficult. But my aunt, uncle, and Jeremy did their best to distract me. They told funny stories, they made toasts, they kept the conversation light and cheerful. They reminded me, in their own subtle ways, that I was loved, that I was supported, that I was part of their family. I don't know if my parents ever took the posts down. I don't care. I haven't checked, and I won't. Update 3, it's been a little over 2 weeks since the graduation, and the social media firestorm. Life has settled down, somewhat. I've been completely immersed in the job hunt. Sending out resumes, crafting cover letters, going to interviews, it's been a stressful process. But it's a welcome distraction from the family drama. I'm still living at my Uncle Kevin's house. Obviously, returning to my parents' house was never an option. Staying with my aunt and uncle has been a lifesaver. We have dinner together most evenings, watch movies on weekends, just exist together in this comfortable, supportive way. It feels like what a family should be. I learned, indirectly, through a conversation between my Aunt Donna and one of my cousins, that my Uncle Kevin did, in fact, contact my dad after the social media posts. It wasn't a casual phone call. It was a formal, lawyer-to-lawyer type of communication. My uncle, who has a friend who's a lawyer specializing in defamation cases, had a letter drafted, threatening legal action if my dad didn't immediately remove all the posts and issue a public apology. Apparently, my dad initially tried to bluster and argue, but when he realized my uncle was serious, he backed down. The posts disappeared. There was no apology, of course, but I didn't expect one. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? That my parents would finally realize they'd gone too far, that they'd burned the bridge beyond repair. You'd be wrong. A few days ago I received another email. I had my guard up, of course. After the graduation fiasco, I'd become hyper-vigilant about checking sender addresses before opening anything. This one was from a new email account, one I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply, "We need to talk. Mom and Dad." My initial instinct was to delete it. To block the sender and pretend it never happened. But, curiosity, that insidious little voice, got the better of me. I told myself I just wanted to see what they could possibly say after everything that had happened. I opened the email. It was shorter than the previous one, but no less manipulative. They started by saying they were deeply disappointed in my behavior. They accused me of being ungrateful and disrespectful. They reiterated their claim that my Uncle Kevin and Aunt Donna were manipulating me, that they didn't have my best interests at heart. Then, they shifted tactics. They said they'd been talking to a family counselor. I highly doubted this, and that the counselor had suggested they try to reach out to me one last time, to offer an olive branch. They said they were willing to forgive me for my transgressions if I would agree to meet with them, in person, to discuss our issues. They suggested we meet at a neutral location. They even proposed a specific date and time. I didn't reply. I didn't even consider it. But, in a moment of weakness, I didn't block the email address right away. I told myself I was just keeping my options open, gathering information. It was a stupid mistake. 2 days later, another email arrived from the same address. This one was different. This one was vile. The subject line was, "Disappointed in you. Mom and Dad." I hesitated. But again, that morbid curiosity won out. I opened it. It started with the usual accusations, that I was being ungrateful, disrespectful, that I'd been brainwashed by my uncle and aunt. But then it took a dark, disturbing turn. They said that my uncle threatening legal action was proof that he was hiding something. They claimed that he and my aunt were unstable and unfit to be around me. And then, they repeated that horrific lie about my aunt's miscarriage. They said, and I'm quoting here, "The only reason they lost their baby was because they weren't the right kind of people to have a girl. God made your aunt have that miscarriage because he knew they weren't fit to be parents. They told me to wake up and come home before it's too late." This time, I didn't hesitate. I slammed my laptop shut. I immediately blocked the email address. Then, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I cried. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, gasping sobs. I haven't told my Uncle Kevin or Aunt Donna about this latest email. I can't bring myself to do it. I know how much it would hurt them. They've been so kind. I don't want to burden them with my parents' toxic vitriol. I'm keeping it to myself. For now. But it's eating at me. I feel like I need to do something, but I don't know what. Update 4, it's been a couple of months now. The biggest news? I got a job. It's an entry-level position. It's not exactly my dream job, but it's a foot in the door, and it's in my field. The work is interesting enough and the people are surprisingly nice. My direct supervisor is a young woman, maybe late 20s, and she's been incredibly supportive and helpful. And I moved out of my Uncle Kevin's house. That was a big step. I'd been feeling a little guilty, like I was overstaying my welcome, even though they insisted I wasn't. I found a small, one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood about a 15-minute drive from my uncle and aunt's place. The first few nights were strange. I was used to the sounds of my uncle's house. My apartment was silent. But I'm adjusting. I bought some cheap furniture from a thrift store, hung some posters on the walls, and started to make it feel like home. I even adopted a cat, a scruffy little tabby. He's been a great companion, a furry little ball of chaos that keeps me entertained. I still see my Aunt Donna and Uncle Kevin regularly. I go over for dinner at least once a week, sometimes more. As for my parents, silence. I haven't heard from them since that last, hateful email. I've blocked them on every platform I can think of, email, social media, phone. I've even considered changing my phone number, just to be sure. I've heard, through the family grapevine, my cousin Jeremy keeps me updated, much to my aunt's disapproval, that they're still living their lives as if nothing happened. They're still going to their fancy dinner parties, still posting carefully pictures on Instagram, still pretending to be the perfect, happy family. I guess some things never change. I've also started seeing a therapist. It was Uncle Kevin's suggestion, actually. He noticed I was still struggling, even after getting the job and moving out. He gently suggested that talking to a professional might help me process everything that had happened. I was hesitant at first. I'd always been a pretty private person, not one to share my feelings easily. But I trusted my uncle, and I knew he was right. I'm focusing on building my own life, I'm focusing on my career, my furry little companion cat. Thanks Reddit for everything you have done for me.